Hello, it's Concord Wind. I've talked to two people so far that are hesitant to do their duty and spread the gospel, whatever gospel they believe in. One person believes in the gospel of Jesus, the other is unsure of what gospel they believe in. But, you can still do your duty. Doing your duty is one of the primary practices of the truth. Like what I do on this channel. Using the internet as a tool to do your duty is really smart, I think. And you should do your duty regardless of how much of the truth you understand or what gospel you believe in or whatever. You should do your duty. It's an important practice of the truth. And just like God says, even if you only reach the level of obtaining knowledge of your corrupt disposition, I still say to you, do not give up. So, those are God's words. And God's words tell us that basically you should still practice the truth. You should still do your duty, even if you don't have much experience with practicing the truth. Like if your only experience with practicing the truth would be you doing your duty, you can talk about your corruption, and that's part of your testimony of how God exposed your corruption and showed you your corruption. And so anyways, I prepared a passage of God's words to read. I'm going to read it. God's requirements of people are not all that high. As long as people practice diligently and earnestly, they would receive a pass grade. Truth be told, achieving the understanding, knowledge, and comprehension of the truth is more complex than practicing the truth. First, practice as much as you understand and practice what you have comprehended. In this way, you'll be able to gradually achieve the true knowledge and comprehension of the truth. These are the steps and the means by which the Holy Spirit works. If you do not practice obedience in this way, you will not achieve anything. If you always act of your own volition and do not practice obedience, will the Holy Spirit work within you? Does the Holy Spirit work as you wish, or does he work according to what you lack and on the basis of God's words? If this is not clear to you, you won't be able to enter into the reality of the truth. Why is it that most people have spent much effort reading God's words, but merely have knowledge and cannot say anything about a real path forward? Do you think that possessing knowledge amounts to possessing the truth? Is that not a confused point of view? You're able to speak as many pieces of knowledge as there are grains of sand on the beach, yet none of it contains any real path. Are you not trying to fool people by doing this? Are you not making an empty show with no substance to back it up? All such behavior is harmful to people. The higher the theory and the more it is devoid of reality, the more it is incapable of taking people into reality. The higher the theory, the more it makes you defy and oppose God. Do not consent spiritual theory. It has no use. Some people have been talking about spiritual theory for decades, and have become giants of spiritualism. But ultimately, they still fail to enter the reality of the truth. Because they have not practiced or experienced the words of God, they have no principles or path for practice. People like this are themselves without the reality of the truth, so how can they bring other people onto the right track of faith in God? They can only lead people astray. Is this not harming others and themselves? At the very least, you must be able to solve real problems that are right in front of you. That is to say, you must be able to practice and experience the words of God, and to put the truth into practice. Only this is obedience to God. Amen. That reminds me of a practice that I do for honesty. Is anytime someone asks me a question, I think, before I say anything, I think in my mind, what is the most honest answer I can give? And I just, and I, no matter what is asked of me, I always put effort into being as honest as I possibly can and to just tell the truth, and that's one of my principles is always be honest, but practice wisdom as well. Like I'm not gonna go around openly telling people things that would get me in trouble, but like if the FBI were to come over to my apartment and ask me about some things, I would be very open and honest with them. I would let them know everything, and that's what would actually get me out of trouble, because my explanation, like the truth of the situation that I've been in for the past year, is that I haven't broken any laws, and that's the truth. And I can explain, and I have websites and things that I can show to prove that I haven't broken the law. And so, but I wouldn't go around like just telling people, explaining that situation to people. I'm not even telling you guys about it, because I don't want people to be turned away from God and from the truth because of some stupid things that I've done, but I didn't break the law. So I just want to make that very clear, so that, because even me just saying this might make some people think less of me, because they're like, oh, what did he do? Well, if it gives you peace of mind, just know this much: I didn't break the law. So yeah, it's not that big of a deal. But if people knew about it, they would think less of me, and they probably wouldn't be able to receive the gospel from me. So I use wisdom. I want to be open and honest, but some things are either too embarrassing to talk about, or just inappropriate to talk about, or it'd make people think less of me and they wouldn't be able to receive from me. And so I have to use wisdom. Some things I do have to keep hidden. Only me and God know about them. And some people, there's some people in my life that I trust that I've told about these things, like my family and Maria, I've told about these things. And they're very understanding, but not everybody would be as understanding as they are. So I don't want people like in my neighborhood to know about some things, because they might look at me differently and not be able to receive the gospel from me. And God's work is priority over anything else. So like that's another principle of mine, is prioritizing the interests of God's house, prioritizing the interests of God, prioritizing God's management plan, prioritize spreading the gospel. And if there's anything I can do that would hinder the spreading of the gospel, I'm not going to do it. If there's anything that would stop people from being able to receive the gospel, I'm not going to do it. And that's the wisdom. And that's another principle of, putting the interests of God's house first. That's number one. That's one of my principles. And that's what I practice, That's why I'm very careful with my words. But I make sure to be transparent and honest. But I'm not transparent about everything. And I admit that, and that's because some things would hinder God's gospel from spreading. And so it's much more wise to keep those things hidden and just keep them between me and God and a select few people. It's much better and more wise to do it that way, so that people can still receive from me. So that those are some practices of the truth that I implement in my life, and I've adopted those principles as my own. They've become who I am as a person, and so that's part of the path, is spread the gospel, be open and honest, use wisdom, put the interests of God's house first. Those are 4 of my principles. That's not all of my principles, but those are 4 principles that I can think of, right now that I put into practice. And I've adopted these principles as my own, and they've become who I am as a person. These principles are my own principles. They come from God's words, but I've made them my own. They've become my life, and it's what I live out. So that's part of the path. That's a path right there for you to practice. So yeah, hope this helps. Thanks so much for watching. God bless and goodbye.